Hello.
Hello.
A few people might trickle in, but I know a couple people wanted us to send the recording to them. So is it okay if we record?
Of course.
Perfect. Okay. Well, my name is Avie Moore, and I would like to welcome everybody watching to Harmonic Youth Orchestra's Summer Festival. It's our second day, and we have Professor Kloetzel with us. We're so happy to have you here. And maybe I'll hand it over
Happy to
to
be
one of
here.
our hosts. Yes, Rachel Fox, and maybe she can introduce you.
Okay.
Hello, as Abby said, I'm Rachel and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. So here's just a quick introduction on Professor Kloetzel. Professor Kloetzel is a graduate of the Juilliard School and a Fulbright Scholar, and she's a well-known cellist that has performed throughout the United States, Europe, and Asia as a soloist and chamber musician. She is a founding member of the Cypress String Quartet, and she is noted for her elegant playing and vibrant tone. She's also a frequent guest soloist with orchestras and has received many awards for her playing and for her musicianship. In 2016, Professor Kloetzel was invited to join the faculty at University of California, Santa Barbara, and she currently serves there as the professor of cello and head of strings. We are so excited to have you here with us today. So um, if you could just start with us about short background and how you got to where you are today and talk a little bit about finding your musical path, that would be great.
Okay. Thanks, Rachel. What a nice introduction, and also excellent to have two people introduce me and pronounce my last name correctly. Always something. I created a hashtag for my last name that my siblings have taken onto, which is Kloetzel rhymes with pretzel, because people always look at it. There's an O and an E in there, and it's a little daunting. So, anyway, I'm so thrilled to be here and have my head is just spinning with ideas of things to talk about. But I'll just give you the little intro about my life and so far. So I was fortunate enough to be born into a family that was very supportive of the arts. That's one of those things we'll be talking today a little bit about luck and hard work and those and how those things combined. And I was fortunate that my mother was an opera singer, my father was a biologist, but I'm one of four children, and each one of us had to study piano and another instrument, and we were encouraged to work hard and practice and find our own way in that way. And so I have two older brothers. My oldest brother chose percussion when it was his turn, and my mother was a little bit like, okay, I guess we'll go with that because it's what he wants. And then my second brother wanted to study trumpet, and my opera singer mother was a little upset about the drums and the trumpet in the house at the same time practicing. So she brought a cellist in to play for my brother Steve to try to convince him that maybe he wanted cello instead. Well, Steve ended up playing trumpet, but I was 4 or 5 at the time, and I heard the cello, and I just said, "That's what I want to do. That's my instrument." And my parents said, "You're too small. You're not ready yet." But I begged for an entire year. So when I was 6, they rented a half-size cello for me, and off we went. But I don't want to make it seem like I knew that that was going to be my life. It just was something that appealed to me. The sound. I loved. And I also studied piano, and I studied voice, and I danced, and I did theater, and I had a million interests. So part of my background is through all the way through my high school career. Until my senior year, I wasn't sure I would go into music at all. And then we're at that stage where you have to choose. So I did. I took some auditions and ended up going to Juilliard for my undergraduate degree. And I'll tell you right off the bat that my freshman year at Juilliard was a little bit of a shock because I was not so accustomed to just focusing on one thing. So I had to kind of recalibrate how I worked and what I wanted my focus to be. Now, mind you, I did a bunch of other things like start a student council. They didn't have one there, and things. So it wasn't just about cello practice, but that was a big part of it. Had a great time in New York. It was a really interesting place to study and to be surrounded and steeped in this musical tradition. And I ended up going away every summer to different music festivals, like so many of us do, to gain experience and meet new teachers and find new inspirations. And met a teacher in England who I really, really wanted to go work with. He had been Jacqueline Dupre's teacher, and she was an idol of mine growing up. So I ended up getting a Fulbright grant to go study in London, which was kind of a miracle, and had a great time there and learned a ton. Again, a bit of a shock because it was literally, my grant was for me to learn to play the cello better. So I was practicing 5 or 6 hours a day and having a lesson a week, and that's what that grant paid for. And then trying to find my own way through that. So because life throws us funny curveballs, I finished that and I was about ready. I was like, where's my career? I'm ready. I'm ready for it. I practiced a lot. I'm ready to wear my concerts. What am I going to do now? And I had to move back in with my parents, which is always very glamorous to do in your, early 20s. Um, but it was again, I was lucky. They were very supportive of that. I got a chance to kind of get back on my feet, figure out what I wanted to do. I did a lot of freelance work. I began to explore all kinds of playing, and I was trying out chamber music and orchestras, and I was setting up solo concerts for myself. And I'm very big on setting really massive goals. And whether it's, I have a whiteboard in my music room where I just start writing out things that I'm interested in doing, and then I try to figure out plans as to how to make those work. So I began to do that. And one of the things I decided was that I really needed to go back to school to learn some more. So I didn't yet have a master's degree, so I ended up going back to Juilliard, getting a master's. When I was finished my studies there, again, you're at that precipice, right? It's like, what's going to happen now? Do I want to go and get a doctorate? Do I want to try to find a teaching job? Do I want, what do I want to do? And this opportunity arose where I knew some people who were starting a string quartet in San Francisco, and they asked if I wanted to audition for them. It was or for us to audition each other, I guess. And I was pretty busy in New York, so the 3 of them came to New York to audition me, and we spent 2 days playing together, and then there was a big blizzard in New York and they got stuck there, and so we spent another 2 days playing together and decided that I would do that. So I picked up and moved as soon as I finished school to San Francisco, and the Cypress String Quartet was born, and 20 years of that. And when we decided to disband in 2016, I had to figure out the next steps, and then I made my way to UCSB. So that's it didn't seem like a very short version of that, but that is the short version.
Well, thank you for that short background, and we really appreciate it. How did you end up deciding to go on the chamber soloist path? And could you, I guess, talk to us a little bit about finding a musical path and I guess your experiences with that?
Sure. So one of the hard things about choosing your path is there's so many interesting things to do, right? And people want to pigeonhole everybody. This is who that person is. It's an easy way to know who people are, whether it's if they're writing about you in the press, or if you have a friend who says, oh, that's the person that likes to do contemporary music, that's the person who likes to do jazz, that person likes orchestral music. But humans are never quite so one-dimensional. So I love it. The great soprano or singer Jessie Norman was asked once how she would characterize her voice, and she said, well, pigeonholes are only comfortable for pigeons. And I take that to heart because I find so many things interesting. I always loved solo music. And by solo music, I mean not just the concertos and like the Bach suites and things, but sonatas, which already lead us into chamber music and stuff too. I feel like I've spent so much of my life creating my own sound, the sound that I want to represent me. And so it felt to me like I wanted to find a way to share that. So solo is a great way to do that. Chamber music had always been a part of my life, and I really grew to love it more and more as I had more experience doing it, and when I found like-minded people. Now, we all have probably been placed in a chamber group where people are fighting and it's not really that fun. Or you have just completely different ideas about how you want to play the music. And I had, it took a while before I found the right mix of people. And once I did, I just found exploring with other people in the room, like really diving deep into the music, was fascinating to me. So one of the things I did want to talk about is looking at the opportunities in your life for what they lead to, because you'd be amazed that occasionally one little thing that happens to you leads, it just opens up a whole area of your life there. So and so I wanted to tell you the story about it, which is sort of directly leads to why chamber music became first the big focus of my life. Which so I when I was living in England, I was doing a competition in Italy, a cello competition. It was in Cremona, Italy. It was great. That's where Stradivarius lived. That's where, a lot of amazing things happened. So it was amazing to be there. But I prepared, for months for the competition. Did the audition, made it to the semifinals, didn't make it past that, but I stayed around to watch the finals, which was fascinating. And I encourage anybody, instead of licking your wounds or packing up and going home, stick around, see what's happening, see who is succeeding, because you may learn a lot from that. But beyond that, a couple of the judges, who were very lovely, spent some time with the people that didn't get passed on and gave us some good commentary. And I met one of the judges, and I had a long talk about what I needed to work on and what maybe didn't work for me in that competition. And then he ended up inviting me to some master classes he was teaching in the south of France that summer. And one of my big things that I say to everybody is say yes. Just say yes to stuff. Make it happen. So I said yes. And that whole trajectory, me losing that competition, but going to these master classes, really did change the course of my career, of my musical career. I had an amazing time at those classes. I became good friends with this cellist. Gary Hoffman is his name. He's an incredible cellist. Studied with Janus Starker, teaches, actually just got a job at Curtis. He also teaches in Belgium. And it was through getting to know him and having this, mentorship that he recommended me for a chamber music festival in La Jolla, California, where I was one of Andre Previn's rising stars, they called it. What was amazing about that festival was it was a side-by-side kind of festival where you got to play with the professionals. So there were this younger generation and this older. So my first Brahms piano quintet performance ever was with Andre Previn playing piano, for example, things like that. So, but the playing level was very high and the people were amazing. And I felt like I'd been struck a little bit like by lightning. And I said, oh, this kind of music making is what I want. So I began to pursue that. And that eventually led to the quartet playing, for example. So that's a little bit. And then the solo playing's always been there. Whether it's been, as I said, the concertos or the solo. I premiered a lot of pieces written for me. Actually, just this morning in my inbox, I got a brand new work, and that's like Christmas morning. I just open it up, and this composer lives in France, and he still handwrites all his music. And until it gets engraved, that's what he just sent me a scan of the pages of this piece in his own handwriting, and that's magic, as far as I'm concerned.
Wonderful. Sorry, I'm gonna jump in. I have a question.
Sure.
I'm friends with Ivan, another one of the hosts who takes lessons with you, and he always talks about how you talk about having your own musical voice, to not only finding your own musical path, but deciding what kind of sound you want to have, not what your teacher wants you to have. Right. So how do you create your own voice and maintain it when in a chamber group setting, when you have to blend with everyone else and kind of have one sound with everyone, but also your own unique sound?
Interesting. So let's see, if we're talking about a chamber group that's, you're your solo part within that chamber group, right? Generally. Yeah. Because generally that's what chamber music is. We're not doubling up. So already you're going to be able to have your own sound with that. Now, you can't have your own intonation with a group like that, because that's not, that could be part of your sound if you're playing solo. But so one of the things that I like to do when I'm playing with a group is, first of all, listen carefully around, because if you can try to match other people while having, you're gonna you will contribute your own sound, but if you can try to match other people and figure out what they're doing and how they're creating sound and vibrato and tone and quality of sound and how they manage dynamics, suddenly, if you can kind of copy that or match that in some way, you've expanded your palette. So, and then maybe you could say to them, hey, I hear it this way. Can I try it? Can we try it my way? Could you guys follow along with me and do it this way? So one of the great things about playing chamber music is you suddenly you have other people in the room with you who have 20 ideas of their own. And you come in with your 20 ideas, and then, I mean, the whole time can be spent trying each other's ideas and ways of doing things. So in terms of, I mean, I don't think it's possible to necessarily just say, okay, this is how I'm going to sound, right? That you want to do that in your practice room, you want to do that in your solo playing, you want to contribute in your way, saying, here's how I hear it. But at the same time, that flexibility is going to be key to you growing as an artist, right? And becoming a better musician in that way, if that makes sense. So that's not specifically about the quality of sound you're making. One of the things I tell my students often is, the first thing everybody notices about any particular player is their sound, above and beyond anything else, right? And we all have people that you'll hear a quality of sound, you go, I love that. That's what we want to look for too, as we're developing our own sound, is what is it that you ache to make that kind of sound. That's what I want. And then if you can kind of create that on your own and then contribute that back to a group and say, hey, you guys, I'm hearing this Debussy passage like this. And then put good words on it too. So you've had the idea that you've hatched in your head. You've practiced to make it work, right? This is how I can create that kind of magical, ethereal sound. And then, as you see, I just put words on something. Then you describe it to people and you try it together and see if it works. So I think that's a little bit about the individual path on there. It's not about being super stubborn. I mean, there are times to be stubborn, believe me, when people are pushing you around into places you don't want to go or making you sound in ways you don't want to sound. But chamber music and solo playing are places where you can explore that a little more. That's harder, especially as a string player in a bigger ensemble, because if I'm, one of 10 cellists blending into a section, it's very important I don't stick out in an orchestral setting or something. And much as I have nothing against orchestral music, that music is incredible. It's just not the path that I've gone in now. I'll admit to you that I'm nervous to go. If I go and play in an orchestra, I think I would be really nervous that I would stick out because I'm not sure how to blend with other cellists in that same way anymore. But it would be fun to try, if the opportunity arises. I think hopefully I answered that for you.
Yeah, that was a great answer to that question. On a similar line to the previous question, when you were just beginning out your solo and chamber career, how did you differentiate yourselves from other musicians in order for yourself to stick out and to get those opportunities that other people were competing for as well?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I would say about that, which may not be a very popular answer, but has to be said, which is first things first is we got to work on technique, because there's no substitute for being able to play well. You have to do the work. Talent is not enough. Having a cool look to you, a great attitude, all those things are not enough. You have to be able to actually do the playing, right? So often people forget that side of things, or they want to get beyond that, and that never ends in a way. I was just practicing scales yesterday for example, right? So because I want to make sure that when it comes to me creating the voice that I want to hear, that I'm fluid in my abilities, because otherwise I can't quite grasp it, and there's nothing more frustrating than knowing what you want and not being able to do it. So that's number one. And I think that I was not taught that very well as a youngster, that I needed to. So I had greater ideas than I had abilities, and I had to figure out a way to catch up with that. So it took a lot of work and a lot of discipline. Also, listening to a lot of music is really important, and I don't mean just in these things. I mean, go to concerts. I know it's been hard these last year and a half. There haven't been so many, but go hear what people sound like in different spaces, and stay really open to what's out there so you can figure out your choices. What do you like? What speaks to you? Other ways that I think you can differentiate yourself, take the time to think, take the time to read, travel, be open-minded to things. Everyone, and ask questions, ask really good questions to people around you. If you find people that inspire you, it's going to be hard. Somebody is rarely going to say, no, I can't talk to you. If you say, hey, could I, buy you a cup of coffee and just pick your brain about a couple ideas I have or thoughts I have, or could I play for you, or could, be bold, be brave in that stuff, because what's the worst that can happen? Somebody says no, right? That also doesn't go away either. I recently was very nervous to ask a composer to write a piece of music for me, and I had to give myself a pep talk about, if I don't ask, I'll never know. And by the way, I asked and I still don't know, but I'm glad that I asked, and it could be that I'll hear back from her at some point. She's a very, very busy, popular composer. So, but in terms of starting out and finding that sound, I think some of what I've been talking about so far with the figuring out what appeals to you, what do you really like, and then try to push the boundaries a little bit on that too. So I knew that classical music was what I wanted to do, but I also really love jazz. And that makes me really nervous over there I'm not really great at, improvising and things like that, but boy, am I impressed by people who can do that. And then, lo and behold, a little opportunity came my way where I was asked to play in a little quintet, jazz quintet. And now they want to record with me. And it's something I'm still sort of playing with and exploring over here. But I think it contributes to everything else I'm doing. Right? I'm finding my own voice in that way. And in that, I don't know whether I'm great at that, but I have fun. And don't, ever minimize that enjoying what you're doing is going to translate to an audience too. We've all been to those concerts, right, where the person coming out on stage looks terrified. And I think that they don't realize that people in the audience want to see them do well. Maybe in a competition, somebody's going to hope that you're going to fail, but more often than not, they're going to really want you to succeed, and they want to celebrate you and watch your development. And my class at UCSB, I love that, they are all so supportive of each other, and they watch each other grow through our weekly classes, and we do little competitions together and things, but it's a team. And that brings me to something else I wanted to talk about, which is really getting to become good friends with the people around you. No matter where you are, you're probably going to run into some of those people down the line. And let's say that you want to be a soloist, and you had a friend that you've known since youth orchestra, and they sat next to you. I have a friend who I sat next to my first day of theory class at Juilliard, and we became friends. We were freshmen together there, who's now a really great conductor. I had no idea. He was a pianist back then. He's a really great conductor now. Well, if I'm a soloist and I want to find places to play concertos, who are the first people that I might reach out to, especially if I have an interesting concerto commission or something else? I mean, that's the list, right? It's not, I wouldn't be cold calling anybody. I'd be saying, oh, I have these contacts. I mean, the very first composer I commissioned was somebody I had known from my early days at Juilliard as well, right? And when we were thinking, who are we gonna commission? And I've commissioned, well over 50, 60 works now. That very first one, though, I just last year commissioned him for the 4th time now. So, that those people, the people around you, get to know them, get to know what they like, get to know what their strengths are, because also, if you have those visions of what you want to do, maybe together you guys can build things. Let's say you want to present a webinar. I mean, look at you guys. You've all come together, you're practicing your different, I'm sure you were talking about who's good at doing this or that or the other, and we're going to divide and conquer. That's an important thing to do too. So really looking around and figuring out, what people like and what they can help you with and what you can help them with as well. So.
That is a great way for students to really connect with each other and also to find those opportunities in the future. So since you're a professor, you obviously spend a lot of time with music students. Other than networking with peers, what are some ways that students could take advantage of their time in their music classes to expand their musical knowledge and to earn musical opportunities, such as a performance with an outside group?
Um, Great. Let's see. So, being super curious. Ask Ivan about that one. I talk to all of my students about being more curious. So, if you're in music school and I know we do need to do that times, but we need to spend the time in the practice room and work on our technique. We need to go to our classes and complete the paperwork for that. And we need to listen to music to make sure we're developing that side of ourselves. But being as curious as you can be, I can't tell you the number of times somebody comes to me with a piece of music that they've spent hours working on. And it's only hours at that point. It's not weeks and days and months, right? Hours working on. And they haven't done the smallest bit of research on what the piece is about or anything about the composer. They don't know the time period. They don't know the inspiration behind it. Be more curious, because it will inform the decisions you make in the music you're playing, right? And it's so easy nowadays to do this. You don't do that. You don't have to go to a library. We got many computers in our, in our hands. You can just, and also, while I say that, I'm also going to say, don't just scratch the surface with it. I don't want to see everybody coming in with what they read on Wikipedia of something. Let's dive a little deeper than that, because you may go down some rabbit holes that'll be misleading, but others will be really interesting, and they will inform the way that you're going to approach all the music and how you study. And then I believe that people respond. So if the professors around you, your colleagues, they will respond to watching you do that, and they'll be interested, and then you might bring some other people along on that journey. This is part of the also being brave and being curious, being questioning about things. When I went back for my master's degree, so I had already been out of school for a couple of years, and I came back, which set me apart from some other students in grad school, because many of them had come straight through, right? People, those perpetual students, and no judgment on either end, by the way, but just I felt like I was in a slightly different place. And one of the best classes I took at Juilliard was a business of music class, which I think has become more prevalent now, but it was a new class back then. And it was run by a wonderful radio host and personality. Again, somebody I connected with who later presented me in a radio program. See, there's that whole thing about being curious and being, so most of the people in this class, I swear, they were asleep for half the class. And I knew that all of the stuff that he was teaching, they were all things I needed to know, because I didn't know. I didn't know how to do what they call an elevator pitch, right? Where you have to talk about yourself in 2 minutes and explain what makes you different than others. I didn't know how to write a bio. I didn't know how to put together a resume. I didn't know. So I was really curious about all of that. So anybody, and he would have guests in each week to talk about different subjects. And I volunteered every single time I could to be a guinea pig in the class, because again, half the people in there were sleeping, right? So not only did that, then he noticed what I was doing, and not only did that lead to then me being presented on his radio program later, but there was a set of guests who came in, and they were talking about starting your own things, starting your own festival, commissioning music, and I was really curious about that. And so I had volunteered to kind of get up there with them and imagine through a scenario. And they contacted me later, and we put together a little summer festival that summer. And they were both out there in the world, professionals, and they helped me write a grant that we were able to get to present the festival. Anyway, my point being that if you put yourself out there, if you go a little above and beyond, people will notice. And that's something I think anybody can do. So whether it's to being more curious or taking on a little more than you think you might be able to handle. I hear from students all the time how busy they are, and I know they are. But I do want to point out that it doesn't get less busy as you get older, because if you want to add in family responsibilities and kids and all that other stuff into the mix, you still have to figure out how to do the work. So being able to manage your time well is something that's so good to learn to do now. And I was just having a conversation the other day with I have a almost 15-year-old son, and he was talking about taking an extra class in high school this year. And sadly, if you want to take an extra class, it's at 7:45 in the morning. Now, none of us maybe really like that time very much. And he was saying to me, well, I don't want to do that because it's too early. And I said to him, is that how you're going to go through life? Like making choices because you want that extra 45 minutes of sleep? Or is that science class that important to you? So I'm proud to say that he chose the science class without that. I didn't put pressure. I said it was up to him. But, always thinking a little bit farther down the line. Yes, in the moment he might be really tired, but down the line, I think he'll be really happy he took that physics class. So I'm thinking about decisions like that all the time too. So, yeah, I have no idea if I answered that question.
Oh, that was a great answer to that question. I really appreciate how you emphasize the importance of putting yourself out there and just going for it every single time in every opportunity. So for thinking down the line and what you want to do, what would you say to students who aren't sure of what area of music, such as teaching, performance, music production, etc., that they want to follow?
Mm-hmm. I would say that the best thing to do is to try many things out. There are going to be opportunities. So you can volunteer to help anybody with anything, right? And it may be, you may feel like, oh, I really want to get paid to do that, or I really, don't have time to do that. But if let's say music production, people need help with things all the time. You can say, can I help with something? Can I help set up mic stands? Can I watch and see what you're doing for this? Will you show me how to manage this? And can I, carry your bags while I do that? You'd be amazed at what you can learn in that way. And so you may not be getting paid for it, but you're getting an education, which is worth a lot, right? Plus you're making that connection with that person. So, but of all the different things, of the different paths, try orchestral playing. And I don't mean just in school. See if there's some way you can play in some sort of, work with different conductors, work with different type of community organizations just to see what it's like. Because that may light that spark. If we're looking for that thing that makes you, that's your heart's longing, not to sound corny about it, but that's what makes us get up in the morning, right? I want to do that. If you're interested in chamber music, well, going back to the who's around you right now, could you set up a weekly chamber music reading? Because one of the important things to do too as you're a student is get to know all these pieces early on, even if it's just by reading through them. But I have a friend who's an eye doctor who's a really bad violinist, but boy does he love chamber music. And he would, every Tuesday night, whoever's around, he would have a chamber music reading party, and he'd provide snacks or whatever. And at a certain point, actually, I mean, you talk about what I have to offer and what other people have to offer. It was a period of time in my life I didn't have much health insurance. I got free eye care by going and playing in his little chamber group. Plus, I would fill in for whoever wasn't there. So if the second violinist wasn't there, I learned to read violin parts at range, and so my sight reading became really, really, really good. It was a win-win for all of us. Anyway, that would be one way to learn about whether you like chamber music. If you think you want to be a soloist, create a bunch of opportunities for yourself. Create concerts, start thinking about program curation. What do you want to offer an audience? What kind of experience? If you want to play concertos with orchestra, it's hard to get those gigs, right? Well, how many friends do you have? Can you put together an orchestra? My master's recital at Juilliard, I really, really wanted to play this Haydn concerto. So I went to all my friends and I said, I'll buy you dinner if you all will come rehearse twice and perform with me for this thing. And they did. And so I got an opportunity to play that concerto. So think a little bit outside the box. So those are ways, performance ways. Then try a little jazz if you think you might like that. Or if you want to play in movie music or any of those kind of things, find people who do that. Ask them how they got connected to that. See if you can, watch what they're doing. Music production, nowadays, especially with what happened with the pandemic, so many more people became adept at doing production of their own on their computers and learning about that. I have a few students who became very good at things like Pro Tools. over, and one of them actually thinks that might be the direction she wants to go. So explore. There is time to do that. Do it now. Yeah.
That is great inspiration for anybody who is struggling to figure out what they want to do. You mentioned that about like playing different types of music. What would you suggest to students who are trying to figure out what type of music they want to play in a specific setting, such as if they want to be a soloist, what type of music should they play? Like, should they go deep into one composer or get breadth in all of them?
Mm. I would say, try to get as much experience with all of them as much as you can. So I think I mean, we have such a broad range. There are the, historically informed musical. So try out that world if that's interesting to you. Baroque performances. I mean, there's so many great programs now for that. Listen to it first. You can find a lot of that online, and then there are, programs dedicated to that if that's something that's interesting to you. Take a class on contemporary music. Learn some of that stuff. If you have friends who are composers, and if you're in music school, you probably do, volunteer to work on their music for them. I love, this is a very special thing for me when I get a call from a composer or a text from a composer saying, hey, do you have a few minutes? I want to see if something's possible. And so we'll set up a Zoom call or whatever it is, and then they will send me a piece of music and have me play it for them, and they'll ask, is that the best way to put it? And I mean, some of these are very, very skilled and high level composers who do that, but I love the fact that they feel like, we're close enough, and I don't mind falling on my face in front of them either. A few of them I trust well enough and then I can just say, wow, that's going to be hard to put together there, or how, what's your vision for this? I have a composer coming by on Sunday because he wrote a concerto that it involves a lot of pedals, and I've got to sing on this concerto and things too. So we're going to test a bunch of things out for that one. But that's actually really fun to do that. And it's interesting, pushes my boundaries a little bit too. So I don't know if that answers some of that, but I think that there's so much you can try. And let's say you adore Brahms. Well, if you're a cellist, for example, then you better learn the Brahms, the sonatas. You may want to take a look at the double concerto, get to know other Brahms, all the Brahms chamber music, the quartets, the piano quintet, the piano trios. I mean, you can really dive deep, right? That's my work on Beethoven, for example, has been that I've always had a deep love of Beethoven, and so there's hardly a day goes by where there's not some Beethoven in my life somehow. So
I'm so impressed by that, especially because I play the flute, classical flute, pretty much exclusively. And a few years ago, I tried to do jazz flute, and I just kind of wimped out because it was pushing my boundary a little too far. But it's impressive that you're still pushing those boundaries, like singing during a concerto. I don't know, it's crazy. I know we invited you here to talk a lot about like finding your own musical path, but we're going a little off script because we like to hear about like the other things you do about like, being a professor and a professional musician at the same time, and how you balance that. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So it's interesting. You kind of sent me that question before, and I was thinking about that, and I find that, so I'm late to professorship, if you will. I mean, it was in my quartet, we were full-time performers. We had a couple years that we did do some teaching, but it was mostly like I made my living as a performer. But we always did work in schools. So with my quartet, we saw something like 200,000 students over our 20 years together of just, outreach programs in schools. And I love that. I love flipping that switch, giving people something to think about, teaching them something new. It's very cool to be the first cello that some student has heard in some remote, village somewhere. It's also very cool to challenge people's ideas of what classical music means to them. So when I came to be a professor and then trying to balance the career in that, I find that they work together really hand in hand. So one of the things I love doing is, as I'm teaching them to work on pieces of music, I show them how I would do it. And the challenges that I have are often the same challenges that they have. And there's something really fun about that when, like, let's say I'm playing a concerto and one of my students is working on that same concerto and they're struggling, and I'm like, I struggle there too. Okay, let's take this apart together. Let's look at this together. So what's really important to me as a professor is that I'm helping each student find their own voice in their own way, and I'm not putting my ideas on them. I mean, to some point, at some times I need to, because if I need them to learn something and they're just not learning that technique, I may say, do it with this finger pattern for now because you need to learn that, and then you can throw it out later. And actually, think about it. Your teacher is with you, if you're lucky, 1 hour a week. It's not even all 52 weeks a year, right? It's however, that set amount of time, 1 hour a week. Who is your teacher for the rest of that time? You are. Each one of us is the teacher when we're in that practice room. How we're asking questions of ourselves, how we're evaluating our own playing. So I'm trying to teach students that. I also try to teach by example. So the pushing the boundaries of my own and sharing that with them. I think that, recording ourselves and listening back, which is something we all had to do a lot more recently, but I've always, I make all of the students record themselves in our cello classes, and they have to listen back within 2 days and get me comments, because how many of us like to actually listen back to a performance we give like right away? Nope. But if you do it, imagine what you can learn and then move on from there with, right? So if you have to, playing music is, you're staring in a mirror frequently. You have to know, if you don't want to listen to what you just did, what 100 people in an auditorium should want to. No, we have to become more comfortable with how we sound and how we're presenting things, so that when we go out, we have that confidence level in there. So you asked about balance. I know I'm not, but I do find that they go hand in hand, and that if I'm sharing in what I'm doing musically in my solo and chamber career with my students, whether I'm coaching them in chamber music or, and it's very much here's how I would approach that. What do you think? Or giving them things to listen to. I often will start out with a new student. I'll give them a list of 10 recordings of the same, Bach Sarabande or something. And I'll say, okay, I want you to start developing your own musical preferences. Which of these do you like? And not just, and often I won't want them to look at the names of who's playing. We don't want to be distracted by fame, right? What speaks to you and why? That's the really most important thing, is what is it about that speaks to you? And then now you have somebody who you can kind of follow. Oh, I didn't realize that I liked that player. Well, I'm going to listen to more of what they do. And why is it I like what they do? Can I read more about them? Can I dig into their process and how they created the career that they have that I wish I had, right? So there's ways to do that. I think the balance part, so all this is the musical side, the balance part of my life that's more difficult to sustain is the rest of everything else outside there. And sleep. I'm not very good at getting enough sleep, or enough vacation time, because I really am a perfectionist and I'm a little bit addicted to work. So that, and then trying to balance family life around it all too is hard. Or, oh gosh, I really got to vacuum that living room, or do I want to do that, or do I want to go practice right now? Well, let me practice first because I can vacuum later, right? You have to make those choices. So those are the balancing choices that are going to come more in your life later that are important. But also to become comfortable with things not going as you planned. That can be in a day-to-day thing. That can be in a bigger life thing. Sometimes we detour, and you may learn a tremendous amount on that detour. And if you're meant to come back to that other thing, you will. But becoming comfortable with that, I think, is important too. I wanted to make a point about practicing for a second. Sorry, again, here's my own tangent. It's a practice. It doesn't always go as planned, right? I had a terrible practice day yesterday. I could not stay focused. My mind was bouncing all over the place, but I stuck with it. I did practice, and at least I know I did it, right? today when I get the cello out of the case, I'll hope it's a better practice day. But it's like, I mean, if you think about something like what is a practice? People practice yoga, people practice meditation, people practice their instrument. All those things, it's about the act of doing something over a period of time for a certain amount of time with a certain amount of focus, right? Not every day is going to be brilliant. And then I'm always grateful when I have a day like that, that I didn't have a concert, right? I'm like, okay, my mind is not in this today. Great. Well, do I need to go take care of some stuff to clear my mind a little? Do I need to take a walk? Do I need to look at my vision board again and change some things around? What's going on? So asking those questions of yourself are important too.
Yeah, that's great. I really like that you are place more emphasis on the idea of like asking questions of yourself and figuring out in that case like what you want to do during that time. On a similar note, how do you recommend for students to figure out what questions they want to ask their teachers in their private lessons? Because as you said, the time is so limited. How can students best take advantage of that limited time they have?
That's a great question, and something that I had an interesting experience with. So when I went back for my master's degree, I had a different teacher, a new teacher, who was a really well-respected, great teacher, but we weren't quite, I don't know, something was not connecting, and I struggled with that because his class was hard to get into, and he really was legendary. So I was like, what is going on here? And I actually went so far as to meet with somebody in the administration to see if I could switch teachers, and they asked me not to. They said, is there a way that you can find a way to make this work? And it was somebody I really respected, which mattered in this case. So I sat down with myself for a little bit and said, okay, what could I do to make this better? Because obviously this person has knowledge I want. And so I would go in every week with lists so I would practice and I'd be like, okay, what's not working? And I would start writing down what wasn't working. And then I would categorize them and sort of say, okay, wow, something's up with my shifting. I have not learned how to get between these parts of the instrument very well. Going for my next lesson, I had a list of questions about it. I had the best lesson I'd had. I unlocked something. So the fact that that he suddenly realized that I was going to do some of that work, because so often what happens, right? You walk into a lesson, you play, and you wait for the teacher to, shower you with wisdom or whatever they're going to do, right? I think that if we can go in and say, could you tell me how to do this on my own? Because, either point me towards technique books or towards, other resources to help me do this, or show me exercises for how to develop this, or even a way to think about it. And I fixed, so those next 2 years were the best like fixer years of my studies, even though it was my master's, my graduate degree, because I was able to kind of step back and realize what I wanted to fix. So I think we all have that ability. There's got to be something, that you play through something, you're like, that's not quite right. What is it? Is it the sound that's not quite right? Do I not have the, do I need to work harder on my breathing techniques? Or, I don't know. I can't speak to flute. I'm sorry. But, we can figure out what it is that we need to know or that we don't know yet. One of the hard things too, as you're studying, and I experienced this in school, which was your ears or what you're hearing develops more quickly than your own technique. So your technique may be coming up, but you're hearing, and so suddenly you sound worse to yourself than when you started out. It's never true. If you go back and listen to beforehand, it's just that, as the scales fall away from your ears, you start hearing what needs to be fixed or what is different between you and that pro that you adore, your role model up here. And you sort of, how do I get from here to here? Well, those are things I think your teachers can help with. They may have a different idea of that. They may say, okay, here's what you need to work on. But I think if you still keep coming back to, I really want to know about this, you'll find somebody who'll help you with that. That's important. Something else I wanted to say about being a student, become comfortable with, well, don't become comfortable with it, but learn how to take rejection. Um, that is going to be a part of all of our lives. It continues to be, by the way. Yes, between composers saying no, or I just, I'd applied for a grant that I was really excited about and I didn't get. Okay. Am I happy about that? No. But is it the only way I can see things going? No. Okay, that door is closed. I'm going to go a different route, right? Which way am I going to head? But I think that's something that's important too, because often we're told, oh, if you didn't win that competition or if you didn't do that, you're not good. That's never the case. I wish I knew then what I know now about competitions. A couple things about competitions I want to say. One is, it's all about the judges. I judge a lot of competitions now, and I'm often amazed by what I'm thinking about or going through as these things are happening that have nothing to do with these, and I feel very, I feel for some of the students who are super talented, but something's just not worked out, so it's easy to kind of knock them out. But I want to say to that person, keep going, because what you have to offer is really interesting. I can hear what you have going on there, it's percolating, still under the surface, but you have to keep working in order to get up to the level where you could succeed in this. So the thing about competitions is they are a great tool to focus on preparing yourself to, with whatever repertoire. But think about if you're going to spend 3 or 4 months preparing, say, for a competition, and you need to go into that competition thinking, okay, what am I doing here? It's not about winning the prize or not. It's about who am I playing for? Who am I going to meet? Who else is going to be there? What can I take away from this? What can I learn from this? All those things. And if you continue to not succeed at competitions, it does not mean that you're not a good player or that you don't add value to the musical world. It could well be that you should take the energy and effort that you put into those months of preparation and put it into some other area of your life, whether it's, I want to start my own concert series, or I want to start my own chamber group, or whatever it is. That amount of time and effort, put it into something else, and you'd be amazed at what can come out of that. Again, you can't just sit back and wait for it to happen. Nobody's ever going to care as much about your career as you will. Not even your mom. Sorry. It really has to be how much you're willing to go for it and invest in yourself. But I had somebody once say to me that over the course of your life, you'll get about this, if it's a stack of papers, you'll have about this many yeses, this many wins, this many, I got a Grammy or whatever it is, right? And from floor to ceiling, you'll have like 3 or 4 levels of papers of all the rejection. Those don't matter. This is what matters over here, right? And what you do with it then. So that was another tangent, sorry.
Yeah, that idea of just finding the more opportunities, even though a rejection is present, is extremely important for so many students. I know that I've had those situations, and probably everybody else on this call, where somebody says no to either a competition or a conglomerate group, and you just have to find a different door for the opportunity to achieve the goals you want. So on a similar note, what things would you suggest for a student to do in order to have a more concrete idea of what they want to pursue musically after finishing their formal music education? Because I know a lot of people, once they finish their undergraduate or graduate degrees, end up at a spot where they don't really know exactly where they want to go.
And that's a very tricky and interesting point in life, right? Okay, I've done this education, I've got my bachelor's, master's, whatever it is. What next? And it's something that all of us will come to. And actually, there are different points in your life where you may come to it again, like I did just 5 years ago, right? Where it's like, okay, that's ended. Now what? I think that you want to, so find your supporters. Could be your family, could be your friends. See who's willing to be somebody who will be there to bounce ideas off of for you okay, I'm interested. I'm interested in doing this. You want to say to somebody, and then you kind of can map it out. What does that look like? How will that work? it's terrifying, right, to not have a job lined up. And especially this is what every parent's nightmare is for their kids when they go into music or some kind of arts. Well, what are you going to do? And well, it can take some time to build that. And especially because if you're going to, let's say you wanted to go an orchestral route, you've got to take orchestral auditions. You can't do that necessarily while you're in school. You need to find a way to do that. Well, and figure out how you're going to live while you're preparing for that stuff. That's when it's going to be important for you to have a good network. Again, I was fortunate. My parents took me back in after that period of time so I could spend some time figuring out what was going to come next, and start earning a little money of my own too. And don't give up if you have to like take a job that's not music related for a little while to help support that. And actually, you might even find that you love doing whatever that is, and the music's just going to enrich that too. That's also okay, right? But I don't think that you should make decisions based on desperation of like you're worried that there's not going to be something out there for you. You want to keep coming back to, and maybe I'm a optimist here, but you want to keep coming back to what speaks to you. Why are you doing this? What we musicians, we artists, we're storytellers. We're looking at things through our own lens and sharing it with the world. And you're going to have people saying, I mean, you think when I record Beethoven, people don't say, why another recording of Beethoven? I get that all the time. But I say, well, because it's meaningful to me, and I'm looking at it through my lens at this period of time in the world. So that's why it matters. And then you kind of find people who also believe in you in that way too. But I think that you want to figure out what your dream goals are. And then you want to figure out if you can find steps to that in some way. And it could be that you've got to sidestep for a little while to figure out your way up there. Again, looking for the role models, finding people who will help you, working with the people, the contacts, the community that you've built. Knowing that it generally doesn't come easy. Even those people that it looks like it comes easy to, what is it they say, that they're a 10-year overnight success? We haven't seen all the build up to that. And even if you want to, let's say you have a role model of somebody who's highly successful right now. I bet if you dig a little bit beneath the surface, you're going to see a huge community of people who helped put that person where they are right now. I'm always amazed. And then the people who have that experience of they have that community who's been helping build them. There was a concerted effort on everybody's part. Give them all these opportunities. Okay, they're going to play concertos with the community orchestras in the area, and now they're going to play it in the next level of orchestras. And now by the time they make their Carnegie Hall debut, they've performed that music 400 times or something. So it's never just that, like what you see out there, as it's been, oh, they came out of nowhere. So get the experience, say yes, figure out the balance of things, and figure out what is most important to you, because that's why we're here, right? I would hope, anyway.
Yeah, that's an amazing response. An idea of like what's important to you and what you really want to pursue out of this. We have one more question for you today. Thank you so much for answering all of these questions. Your insight has been so inspirational to all students, no matter what path of music they want to go on or what path in life in general they want to go on. So what is something that you would have wanted to know when you were just starting out your solo and chamber careers?
Let me see. Don't let other people tell you who you are. Unless you really respect them and they have your best interest at heart. But I mean, there's so much outside feedback. Something I noticed when I was at Juilliard as a freshman or whatever is that everybody was always talking about other people. That person's good, that person's not good. And I began to, at first I kind of accepted it, and I was like, oh, well, they must know what they're talking about. And then I started questioning it. I started saying, well, have you heard them? Oh, no, I just heard they were bad. Well, then how do you know they're bad, right? So that's chatter, that's noise. Block out the noise, figure out, what it is you want. and I wish I'd had more people sort of telling me that early on, because I think I was really distracted by what other people were saying. Although at the same time, a lot of what they were saying I knew wasn't true. So finding that way and kind of believing in yourself and in your vision, and that it's okay for your vision to change. I've not, the number of people I know who went to a school like Juilliard or Curtis or whatever, who, were incredible musicians growing up, maybe the best in their town or city or youth orchestra or whatever, went to music school and then decided, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a jeweler, or what. I mean, those are two specific people I know, two really great musicians I know, who decided they wanted to do something else. Now, some people would say, well, what a waste. They did all, No, it enriched their lives. Now they've started, one of them started a concert series at their medical center, and they know what they're hiring, and they know what they like to listen to. When is on the board of a bunch of different music series too. So people, this experience enriches our lives. So don't let anybody tell you different about that. And then I think, if I had known, if somebody told me early on to take the time. So I talk about the reading, educate yourself, be more curious, be open to learning, try other classes than just the music classes, because it's all going to enrich who you are as a musician. Ask better questions, take the time to walk, run, swim, whatever it is, to kind of just and do it without other distractions around. Everybody needs, we all have, the second there's a quiet moment, what do we all do? We reach for our phones, or we reach to see what comes to you when you sit there for a little while. See, I think that's to still be of value in this world, right? I find that at the beginning of the pandemic, did you notice how suddenly everybody was throwing up, or live performances of themselves online, which is great, and it was an important thing. But there was, for some of them, there was an air of desperation of like, oh my God, I have to be heard, or people will forget about me. Well, maybe it's a time to sit a little quiet and figure out what it is you want to do next. So, and that's okay too, right? Those are things that I wish I'd been told early on. And if you don't end up getting into the school you wanted to go to, or the program you wanted to go to, or the competition you wanted to win, or whatever it is, find another way. Doesn't mean the end of things. It feels like it at the moment, right? It feels like it's the worst thing ever, but you don't know down the line. You look back at your life and you kind of go, oh, that actually worked out really well for me. I didn't know that.
Yeah, this is some amazing advice for all of these students here watching, or for any students who are going to watch the recording later. Thank you so much for being here. All of your wisdom is so great and so helpful for all of these students. I'm going to turn it over right now to Abby to close us out. But thank you again so much for coming and for giving this talk for us.
Thanks, Rachel. Nice to meet you.
Yes, thank you so much. There's a lot of good advice, especially because I've been taking a little bit of a playing break just to, recoup. And now I'm ready. I feel ready with your advice. Yeah, very special to have you here. And we hope everyone enjoyed it as much as we did. We have another talk at 1 p.m. with Professor Ertan Torgel, also from UCSB. So we hope whoever's watching will join that too. Thanks, Rachel, for hosting, and thank you again, Professor Kloetzel, for being here.
Thank you all for listening.
Yes.
Have fun with Professor Torgel.
Yes, thanks. Bye, everyone.